I came home from hip surgery expecting rest, maybe a little kindness. Instead, I found my suitcase dumped on the porch and a note from my daughter-in-law telling me she was done with me. By the next afternoon, I owned the building. If you're still with me, tell me what city you're watching from. I'd like to know how far this story traveled. My name is Vivian. I'm 68 years old. And I truly believed life had already shown me every kind of cruelty. I was wrong. The taxi stopped in front of the apartment building where I'd lived for 15 years. My son Adrian and his wife Celine lived 2 floors above me. Same building. Same family. Or so I thought. The surgery had gone well, according to the doctor, but I'd need crutches for at least 6 weeks. Every movement sent pain through my side. Still, I was relieved to be home. Then I saw the suitcase. My old brown leather case sat outside my apartment door on the concrete landing. The one I'd packed 3 weeks earlier before staying with my sister Celestine for surgery. It should have been inside. Instead, it looked abandoned. I tried to move faster, awkward on the crutches, and noticed a folded white note tucked under the handle. The taxi driver, a kind man who had helped me from the car, frowned. "You okay, ma'am? Need help?" I'm sure it's some misunderstanding," I said. But I already knew it wasn't. I bent carefully, took the paper, and recognized Celine's neat handwriting immediately. Every letter perfect. Every line controlled. The message was colder than I imagined possible. "I'm not your maid anymore. I'm done cleaning up after you and taking care of your mess. Find somewhere else to recover. Don't call Adrian. He agrees with me. Celine." I read it again. Then once more. Sometimes the mind refuses to accept what the eyes already know. The driver was still standing there. "Everything all right?" I couldn't answer. I just stood there, gripping the crutches, holding that note while something inside me cracked open. Celine had promised to help after surgery. She insisted on it when Adrian suggested hiring a nurse. "Don't be ridiculous," she'd said with that bright, polished smile. "She's family." Family. Funny word. Over the past 2 years since she married my son, there had been comments. Small ones at first. My apartment was too cluttered. I should simplify. Maybe I'd be more comfortable somewhere with assistance. She offered to organize my medications, then sighed loudly as if I'd ruined her week. She asked questions about my finances with fake concern. I ignored it because Adrian seemed happy. That's what mothers do. We swallow discomfort to protect our children's peace. But standing there with my belongings on the floor, I finally saw it clearly. She had waited until I was weak, until I was recovering, until I needed help. Then she showed me exactly who she was. The front door opened and Mrs. Park from 3B stepped outside with her little dog. She looked from my crutches to the suitcase to my face. "Vivian? What happened?" Mrs. Park was kind. We'd shared coffee, complaints about the elevator, stories about aching knees. But I couldn't bear saying the words out loud. "Just a mix-up," I said. My voice betrayed me. She looked unconvinced but nodded. "If you need anything, you knock." I thanked her and let myself in. My apartment looked exactly the same. Same lamp by the window. Same blanket folded on the couch. Same framed photos on the shelf. Yet it no longer felt like home. It felt like a place I'd barely been allowed back into. I dragged the suitcase inside and lowered myself onto the couch, still holding Celine's note. The silence was brutal. No missed calls. No text from Adrian asking if I got home safely. No message from Celine pretending to care. Nothing. I thought about calling my son, but one line kept repeating in my head. "He agrees with me." Did he? Had the boy I raised alone after his father left really decided I was too much trouble? I had worked 2 jobs to put Adrian through school. I went without so he never had to. I wore old coats so he could have new shoes. And this was the ending? As the room darkened, the hurt remained sharp and ugly. But underneath it, something else began to form. Something calm. Something steady. Something dangerous. That night was endless. My hip throbbed every time I shifted. Sleep came in short, miserable pieces. Each time I woke, the note was still on the side table. By sunrise, I had made a decision. No tears. No pleading. No begging for scraps of respect. I made coffee slowly, leaning on the crutches, and while waiting for it to brew, I noticed something on the kitchen counter. Adrian's spare key. The one I gave him years ago in case of emergencies, returned without a word. Like I was no longer family. I sat in my recliner with the coffee and started replaying the last 2 years honestly for the first time. There were signs everywhere. Celine criticizing my clothes. Celine saying Adrian worried how I looked. Celine insisting on joining doctor appointments I had always handled alone. Celine asking what prescriptions I took. Celine asking whether my lease was stable. At the time I thought she was intrusive. Now I understood. She wasn't helping. She was gathering information. Celine had slowly inserted herself into every part of my life. She started driving me to appointments I'd managed on my own for years. Then she began sitting in the exam room, answering questions that weren't directed at her, speaking with the confidence of someone who wanted to be seen as necessary. After one visit, she told Adrian loud enough for me to hear. The doctor says she needs to be more careful with her medication schedule. I think she's getting forgetful. I was not forgetful. I'd managed my prescriptions responsibly for a decade. But after that, I noticed something in Adrian's face. Doubt. That was the clever part. Celine never sounded cruel. She sounded concerned, helpful, selfless. Whenever I objected, she'd sigh softly and say, "I'm only trying to do what's best for you, Vivian." And somehow I'd end up apologizing. Then the holidays changed. For 43 years, Adrian and I had our traditions. I cooked his favorite meals. We watched old movies. He talked about work, plans, life. After Celine, dinners moved upstairs. "It's easier," Adrian said. "Celine has the nicer dining setup. And you shouldn't have to cook." So I smiled and agreed. But at that table I wasn't family anymore. I was invited. Celine controlled the conversation, chose the menu, redirected topics whenever Adrian and I slipped into old memories. I'd leave feeling lonelier than if I'd spent the day alone. Then there was Mr. Ashford. He lived down the hall, an older widower who sometimes needed help with groceries or a bowl of soup when he was sick. I checked on him during storms for years. One afternoon Celine called. Her voice was clipped and polished. "Vivian, Adrian and I are worried about you getting too involved with neighbors." "I'm just being kind," I said. "But what if something happens? What if he falls? What if you're held responsible? You need to focus on yourself. You're not getting younger." There it was again. Too old. Too fragile. Too incapable. Now, sitting in my recliner with my coffee gone cold, I could finally see the pattern. Every helpful gesture had a purpose. Every suggestion chipped away at my independence. Every conversation was designed to make Adrian see me not as his mother, but as a problem to be managed. And it had worked. My phone rang, pulling me from the thought. For one foolish second I hoped it was Adrian. It was my sister Celestine. "Vivian, how are you feeling? You were supposed to call yesterday." I had forgotten. She wanted to come with me after surgery, but I'd insisted I was covered. Adrian and Celine had everything handled. I started. Then my voice broke. "Vivian," she said sharply. "What happened?" The moment she asked, everything came pouring out. The suitcase. The note. The spare key on the counter. The silence from my son. When I finished, Celestine said nothing for a few seconds. Then, that vicious little woman. Even through tears I nearly laughed. Celestine had never hidden her opinions. "I never trusted her," she continued. "There was always something calculating in the way she watched you." "Maybe I asked too much," I said quietly. "Maybe she's right. Don't you dare." Her voice hit like a slap. "Do not let her rewrite the truth. You have been generous to that woman from day one." I said nothing. She kept going. "Christmas. You gave her grandma's pearl necklace because Adrian mentioned she admired it." I closed my eyes. I had forgotten that. Celine wore those pearls to every special occasion. Never once mentioned where they came from. "And when she lost her job last year," Celestine said, "who paid for their vacation so she could recover from stress? Who quietly helped Adrian when they were short on rent?" Each memory landed heavier than the last. I had given with an open hand. They had received with both. Celestine promised she'd come the next day, then hung up. I sat in the stillness afterward and felt something clean rise through all the hurt. Anger. Not wild anger. Not noisy anger. The kind that sharpens you. For 2 years I had been minimized, corrected, and slowly pushed aside because I believed keeping peace was worth the cost. But peace bought with self-respect is too expensive. I looked around my apartment, my books, my furniture, my life. I was not the helpless woman Celine had described. I was Vivian Sterling, and I was finished being handled. Celestine arrived the next afternoon carrying grocery bags like weapons, and wearing the same determined expression she'd had since childhood. She had always been the fighter. I had always been the peacemaker. "You look awful," she said, kissing my cheek gently. "Good. Now I know how mad to be." For the first time in days I smiled. She filled the kitchen with motion and noise, putting away groceries, heating soup, complaining about traffic. Ordinary things. Healing things. Once we sat down with tea, her face changed. "I thought about this all night," she said. "That woman planned it." I nodded slowly. "The timing," she continued. "Waiting until surgery. Waiting until you needed help. That wasn't impulse. That was strategy." "I keep replaying everything," I said. "The comments. Telling Adrian I was forgetting things. Suggesting I needed supervision." "She was building a case," Celestine said. "Convincing him you were becoming a burden, so when she made her move, he'd accept it." A hard chill ran through me, 'cause I knew she was right. Then the doorbell rang. Celestine and I looked at each other. No one had said they were coming. Through the peephole, I saw a young man in a navy suit holding a manila envelope. "Miss Sterling? I'm from Ashford and Associates. I have documents that require your signature." The name tugged at my memory. Celestine helped me to the door, and I signed for the envelope while balancing on one crutch. "What is it?" she asked. "I have no idea." I opened it carefully. The moment I saw the letterhead, my breath caught. My Uncle Victor's law firm. Victor was my father's brother. A successful attorney who never married and never had children. He'd always been kind to me in a quiet, steady way. He passed 6 months earlier, and I'd only managed a brief visit to the funeral. My hands began to shake as I read. "Celestine," I said softly, "come here." The documents were from his estate. He had left me assets that had taken months to finalize. One of them was a fully paid commercial residential property generating nearly $8,000 a month in rental income. Then I read the address. I read it twice, then a third time. It was this building. My building. The same place I had lived for 15 years. The same place where Adrian and Celine lived upstairs. The same hallway where my suitcase had been dumped like trash. Celestine grabbed the papers. Good Lord. I barely heard her. My uncle had owned the building all along through a management company. He'd kept it private, and now it belonged to me. 12 occupied units. Reliable rental income. A property in a neighborhood that had risen sharply in value. Then I kept reading. Stocks. Bonds. A life insurance policy. When all of it was totaled, the inheritance came to just over $1.2 million. Celestine leaned back slowly. And Celine has no idea. For the first time since surgery, I felt something stronger than pain. Possibility. "She threw me out of my own building," I said. Celestine's smile turned sharp. "Oh, this is going to be interesting." That evening, after she helped arrange a meeting with Victor's attorney for the following week, I sat alone and let the reality settle in. Not just the money, the position. I was now the owner of the building where my son lived with the woman who had humiliated me. I was Celine's landlord. And she had no clue. For 2 years she treated me like a helpless old woman who needed supervision. She cast herself as the capable adult and me as the burden. All while living in a property that now answered to me. I thought about leases, terms, renewals, deadlines. Adrian and Celine's lease was due to expire in 3 months. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message and felt my stomach turn. It was a photo of me from the day before. Standing in the hallway with crutches, bent awkwardly over my suitcase, confused and hurting. Taken from above. From one of the upper floors. Someone had photographed me during the worst moment of my life. Then I read the text beneath it. Thought you'd want to see how pathetic you looked yesterday. Maybe now you understand why we can't have you around anymore. Celine. I stared at the screen. She hadn't just hurt me. She documented it. She wanted to relive it. That was the moment something inside me became perfectly still. Celestine had been right. This was deliberate, carefully staged, cruel for the pleasure of it. But Celine had made one mistake. She believed I had no power. I saved the photo, saved the message, saved the number. Then I opened my laptop. I spent the rest of the night reading landlord regulations, lease obligations, notice periods, rental increases, and every lawful option available to me. For the first time since I came home, I wasn't thinking about what they did. I was thinking about what came next. The following Tuesday, Celestine drove me to meet Damien Ashford. He was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s with the polished calm of someone who had handled serious matters for decades. "Victor spoke about you often," he said as we sat in his paneled office. "He admired how you rebuilt your life after your husband left. Raising Adrian alone meant a great deal to him. That nearly undid me. Someone had seen. Someone had known." I signed document after document, formally transferring the assets into my name. With every signature I felt steadier. Less like a discarded woman. More like myself. Then Ashford slid a thick folder across the desk. "These are the current leases for all 12 units." I opened it immediately. "Your uncle was old school," he continued. "Fair rents, long-term tenants, very little turnover. Most are below market rate." I found the page I wanted. Unit 4B. Adrian and Celine. Monthly rent, $1,800. Lease expiration, January 31st. Just over 2 months away. I looked up. What would market rent be for a unit like that? Ashford checked his notes. 2-bedroom, updated kitchen, location, parking access? Conservatively $3,200, possibly $35. I nodded once. And renewal procedure? 60-day notice with new terms. They either accept and sign or choose to vacate. Simple. Clean. Legal. He studied my face. "Is there a specific unit you're focused on?" "I'm learning my responsibilities," I said. He smiled faintly, as if he understood more than he said. Over the next few weeks I learned everything. Tenant law, maintenance schedules, insurance, vendor contracts, rent comparables. I hired a management consultant for guidance, then decided I'd oversee major decisions myself. I also began improving the building. Nothing dramatic. Fresh paint in the lobby. The broken intercom repaired. Hallways professionally cleaned. Lighting replaced. Small things that told people someone finally cared. Tenants noticed. They smiled when they saw me. They thanked me in passing. And for the first time in years I wasn't being treated like a burden. I was being respected. Then one afternoon, Mrs. Park stopped me near the mailboxes, lowered her voice, and said something that made my next move very easy. Mrs. Park thanked me one afternoon near the mailboxes. "It's nice to see someone caring about this place again," she said. "The new owner is making a real difference." I smiled. "I'll pass that along." The irony almost made me laugh. I was improving the building while living 2 floors below the woman who had called me useless. During those weeks, Adrian never contacted me. No call. No message. No apology. The silence hurt, but it also confirmed what I had begun to understand. Celine had convinced him distance was wisdom, that cutting off his mother was somehow healthy. So I started keeping records. Her cruel text. The photo. The returned key. The dates of every ignored day. I didn't know yet how I'd use it. I only knew I might need it. Then, 3 weeks after the inheritance, something happened that changed everything. I was coming back from physical therapy, stronger now and using only one crutch, when voices echoed down the stairwell from the 4th floor. Adrian and Celine. Arguing. "I don't understand why you had to be so cruel about it," Adrian said, strained and angry. "She's my mother. We could have handled it differently." "Differently?" Celine snapped. "She was going to move in here permanently, Adrian. She never said that. She didn't have to. One surgery becomes 1 week. Then 1 month. Then suddenly we're taking care of her forever." I stood frozen on the landing. "She never asked for that," Adrian said. "I'm tired of her neediness," Celine shot back. "The calls. The guilt. The way she looks at me like I stole you." There was a pause. Then Adrian again, lower this time. "But leaving her suitcase outside? What if neighbors saw? What if she got hurt? So what if they saw? Celine said. Maybe people should know what she's really like. Besides, she managed, didn't she? Prove she isn't as helpless as she pretends. My grip tightened on the railing. Then Adrian said something I never expected. I keep thinking about what Dad would say if he knew how we treated her. Celine laughed once. Your father left, remember? He couldn't handle responsibility either. We need to think about our future. Do you want the next 20 years spent taking care of your mother? I had heard enough. I went downstairs quietly, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't fully name. Adrian wasn't innocent. But he wasn't gone either. He had doubts. And Celine was working hard to erase them. That night I pulled out their lease file. Unit 4B. Current rent, $1,800. Market rate, $3,500. I drafted a new renewal offer. Then I waited. Because the best consequences are not emotional. They're precise. Celine had taught my son to see me as a burden. Soon, she would learn what it feels like when someone with actual authority decides she is the problem. December 1st arrived. Exactly 60 days before lease expiration. My attorney reviewed every page to ensure it was flawless, lawful, and professional. No threats. No insults. No drama. Just business. The notice stated their monthly rent would increase from $1,800 to $3,500 effective February 1st. They had 30 days to accept the new terms or provide notice to vacate. I delivered it myself at sunrise, sliding it beneath their door. Then I went downstairs, made tea, and waited. For hours later, pounding shook my apartment door. Hard. Fast. Entitled. I know you're in there. Celine shouted. Open this door right now. I rose slowly, using my cane even though I barely needed it anymore. When I opened the door, she stood there gripping the lease notice in a trembling hand, face flushed with rage. What is this supposed to mean? I glanced at the paper. It appears to be a lease renewal notice. Don't play games with me. How did you get our rental information? This is harassment. I kept my voice mild. There seems to be some confusion. I'm the owner of this building. The color drained from her face. What? I purchased nothing, I said. I inherited it. I've owned it for nearly 2 months. Which means, Celine, I'm your landlord. She stared as if language itself had failed her. That's impossible. You live in a 1-bedroom. You don't have money for. Apparently I do. I let the silence sit between us. The increase reflects current market rates for comparable units. This is insane, she snapped. We've been excellent tenants. I tilted my head. Have you? Her eyes narrowed. There was the matter of an elderly resident's belongings being left outside after surgery. That suggests poor judgment. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time since I'd known her, Celine had no script. I continued calmly. Of course, personal matters do not affect business decisions. This adjustment is based strictly on market value. You can't do this, she whispered. I already have. My attorney made certain everything complies with the law. You have until December 31st to decide whether to accept the terms or seek other housing. Adrian appeared behind her then. He looked from her face to mine to the paper in her hand. Confused, uneasy, and suddenly very awake. Mom. What's going on? The word mom hit harder than I expected. First time he'd spoken to me in over 2 months, and it came in the middle of a crisis he hadn't seen coming. Your mother, Celine snapped, apparently owns this building and is trying to evict us. I'm not evicting anyone, I said calmly. I'm offering a lease renewal at market rate. There's a difference. Adrian looked between us, struggling to catch up. You own the building? I inherited it from Uncle Victor, along with other assets I didn't know existed. I kept my tone even, almost gentle. I only learned recently myself. This is revenge, Celine said. You're doing this because of what happened after your surgery. Adrian frowned. What happened after your surgery? The room changed. I watched the exact second panic cross Celine's face. Nothing, she said too quickly. She's twisting things. Celine. Adrian said her name quietly, but there was steel in it. What happened? You told me she chose to recover at Aunt Celestine's. He continued slowly. You said she didn't want our help. Celine said nothing. Adrian stared at her. That's not what happened, is it? I remained silent. I didn't need to speak. Truth was already walking into the room on its own. Adrian, you don't understand. Then explain it. His voice cracked sharp enough to stop her cold. Explain why my mother had surgery and was left alone. Explain why I haven't spoken to her in 2 months. She was manipulating us, Celine said desperately. She wanted to move in permanently. She wanted help recovering from surgery, Adrian fired back. And you turned that into a threat? You don't know what she's like, Celine said. She's always trying to come between us. Stop. He raised a hand. Just stop. Then he looked at me. And for one brief moment, I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Mom, he said quietly. What really happened? I met his eyes and made a choice. It doesn't matter now, I said. What matters is that you are both tenants. And you have a decision to make about your lease. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't mercy. It was control without cruelty. I closed the door gently and left them standing there in the hallway. Sometimes the deepest consequence is simply letting people live inside the mess they created. 3 days later, Adrian knocked on my door alone. I almost didn't answer. But through the peephole I saw slumped shoulders, tired eyes, and a man who looked far younger than his age. I opened the door. Hi, Mom. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like he hadn't slept. I stepped aside. He sat on my couch, the same place where he once did homework while I cooked dinner after double shifts. For a while neither of us spoke. Then he said, "She lied to me." I waited. I found the note. My chest tightened. It was in her purse. He rubbed both hands over his face. I found the photo too. The one she took of you with the suitcase. She kept it on her phone. The shame in his voice was almost harder to hear than anger. She told me you were becoming dependent, he said. That you were hinting about moving in with us. She said we needed boundaries before things got worse. He looked up. That wasn't true, was it? No, I said quietly. It wasn't. He nodded once like he deserved the pain. I should have called you. Yes, I thought. You should have. He flinched, but he accepted it. I know. I was weak. It was easier to believe her version. Where you were fine and I didn't need to do anything. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Park chatting softly in the hallway with her dog. Normal sounds. Strange comfort. Then Adrian said, I filed for divorce yesterday. I felt several emotions at once. Relief. Sadness. A tired kind of justice. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I thought I loved her, he said. But I think I loved who she pretended to be. He looked around the apartment. The framed photos. The bookshelves. The life I had built piece by piece. She always talked about you like you were some burden we had to manage, he said. But look at this place. Look at you. You were never a burden. I said nothing. Sometimes silence lets truth land harder. She can't afford the new rent, he continued. She's calling constantly. Crying. Saying you're trying to ruin her life. And what do you want? He took a long breath. I want to understand why you're doing this. I held his gaze. The increase is legal. Fair market value. You know it'll force her to leave the city. No, I said calmly. Her choices are forcing that. He looked down. I continued. She mocked me when I was injured. Lied to you. Isolated me. Then expected protection from consequences. He swallowed. And you? I asked. What did you expect? That one landed too. I don't know, he admitted. I think you expected me to stay hurt quietly. He didn't argue, because he knew I was right. Then I leaned forward slightly. This rent increase was coming whether Celine existed or not. Your uncle kept rates low for years. I am correcting them. I let that sit for a moment. But I'll tell you the real lesson here, Adrian. He looked up. When someone helps destroy your dignity, they should not expect a family discount afterward. I studied my son's face and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not defensiveness. Not excuses. Confusion mixed with regret. For 2 years Celine convinced you I was a problem to be managed, I said. She made herself look reasonable while making me look needy. She separated us slowly enough that you didn't notice. Adrian winced but stayed quiet. The rent increase is not punishment, I continued. It's market value. This building is my inheritance, my security, and my future. I have a responsibility to manage it properly. I let that settle. But I will not subsidize housing for someone who treated me with cruelty. That isn't revenge, Adrian. I held his eyes. That is self-respect. He nodded slowly. She keeps saying you're trying to control me, he said. That this is your way of forcing me to choose between you and her. Am I asking you to choose? No. Because there is no choice left to make, I said quietly. You already made one. You chose her version of events without speaking to me. You chose to believe I was a burden instead of your mother. My voice stayed steady, but I let him hear the hurt underneath it. I can't force you to love me. I can't force you to want me in your life. But I can make sure I'm never again dependent on people who see me as disposable. We talked for another hour. He told me the marriage had been unraveling for longer than he admitted. That once the divorce began, Celine became even more controlling. She threatened to damage his friendships, embarrass him publicly, make him pay for choosing his mother. She doesn't understand, he said as he stood to leave. I'm not choosing you over her. He paused at the door. I'm choosing honesty over lies. I'm choosing the person who raised me over the person who tried to erase her. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first honest thing he'd said in months. 2 weeks later, Celine moved out. I watched from my window as boxes were loaded into a truck. Her face was tight with anger, but she never looked down at my window. Never knocked. Never apologized. She left the same way she entered my life. Without grace. Adrian helped load the last box. When the truck drove away, he stood there for a moment, then came downstairs. He knocked softly. When I opened the door, he held up a bag of pastries from the bakery I loved. I was thinking, he said, awkward and hopeful, maybe we finally take that Ireland trip you always talked about. I stared at him. The boy I raised. The man who had failed me. The man trying, however late, to become better. I'd like that, I said. 3 months later, we stood on the cliffs of Maher with the wind rushing around us and the Atlantic stretching into forever. Adrian put an arm around my shoulders. For the first time in years I felt peaceful. I never thanked you, he said. For what? For not giving up on me. For not cutting me off when I deserved it. I thought of the suitcase. The note. The returned key. The months of silence. The grief of believing I had lost my only child while still alive. Then I looked at him. You're my son, I said. Some bonds survive even when they're badly damaged. We spent 2 weeks driving through green countryside, staying in little inns, talking more honestly than we had in years. About his childhood. About the sacrifices I never mentioned. About the mistakes we both made. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt what had been broken. When we returned home, Adrian rented a place across town. Not to escape me, but to learn who he was without someone else directing his thoughts. Every Sunday we had dinner together. No phones. No outsiders. No manipulation. Just family rebuilt the hard way. The building thrived under my ownership. As leases renewed, rents moved to fair market value. The extra income went into repairs, upgrades, and a retirement fund that guaranteed one thing above all else. I would never again depend on anyone's kindness to survive. Sometimes I passed the apartment Celine once lived in, now occupied by a warm young family whose children laughed in the hallway. And I'd remember the note she left me. I'm not your maid anymore. She was right about one thing. She was never mine. She was simply a lesson. And letting go of that lesson was one of the most freeing moments of my life. If you were in my place, what would you have done? And tell me what city you watched from. I'd love to know how far this story reached.